So I guess we'll kick off, for those that don't know, who is John Henry? Maybe go into like your background and how you got into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, definitely. Raise your hand if you have a little bit of context on me and the work. Okay, cool. The number goes up a little bit each time, like it's 10% of people. So I, first and foremost, am the very proud son of immigrant parents. That is the most defining part of my journey, because that whole facet of my experience has shaped the way that I look at things, has shaped the way that I approach things. And my mom and dad come from the Dominican Republic, and we grew up uptown Manhattan in the Heights. And we grew up like most people grow up uptown. There's 6 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we grew up really broke, but we grew up really right. Like the family dynamic was beautiful. It was arroz con pollo and dancing bachata, and it was.
Mom makes the best arroz con pollo, bro.
Hey, shout out! I'm coming over afterwards. It was interesting though, because there was scarcity in terms of material things, but there was no scarcity in abundance of, my mom did a great job of nurturing me. Hey, she looked at me when I was in kindergarten, I'll never forget. She said, John, you can be president. And the bravery, the tenacity, the audacity, the forward thinkingness that it takes for a mom in the hood growing up where your environment is nothing but crime and drug dealers and danger, but life and fun and all of these things intermingled. And we hadn't had yet a black president, unless you count Bill Clinton. I was kidding. No, but we hadn't yet had a black president. So for my mom to say, hey, you can be president early on. And the reason I start with that is because that obviously is the most fundamental ingredient to anyone's recipe. So beyond that, I was raised initially uptown. Then we went to Florida because my mom was like, this is no place to raise a family. So we went to Florida. When we came back, I graduated high school, decided to come back to the city. I had the small town blues. I wanted to become great. And that's with a capital G. I wanted to become great. Why? Because I had this chip on my shoulder of having never come up with anything and having seen my parents work so hard. I mean, my mom was a custodian in a hotel, cleaning toilets. That was her job. My pops was a presser in a dry cleaner, getting paid 40 cents per every pair of pants that he pressed. Like, that was our reality. And I knew I feel like I owe it. It's selfish if I don't go out there and be the absolute best that I can be.
Parents
So
work too hard for you not to
they
be
work
great.
too hard. Like, we can't squander this opportunity. So with that, I came back to the city. I worked a job as a doorman, and that's where I say opening up doors for people helped open up doors for me. I did that job with a lot of pride. I didn't go to school, and so if someone would say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and they're successful, I would say, did you go to school? And then they'd say yes, and I'd be like, oh, that's why. And I'd say, some people would say, hey, I'm now a director, I'm now an author of this and that, and I would say, and they would say, oh, but my mom, paid my way through this or paid my way through that. And so slowly but surely, when you come from a very disadvantaged perspective and experience, you start seeing that none of the examples that are before us are truly relatable to you. And you start becoming disillusioned, at least I did. And I was like, man, I feel like I know I can make it, like my mom tells me that, but can I really? And it wasn't until I met an individual who had come from way more disadvantaged circumstance than I did, who, served time, everything, came out and became a self-made millionaire. And he said, what are you doing behind the desk being a doorman? You need to put the work in so you can have your own doorman. There is no excuse. And he was the one who presented me with my first business opportunity, and that's how I got started.
Wow. Big story. So talk to me a little bit about, you did go to college, right?
I did not.
Oh, because
No.
You did not go to college.
I dropped out of school my first semester to pursue what became my first company.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about those initial years of starting your first company. And
Yeah.
what was that like?
Yeah.
And did Hugo become a mentor for you? Or
Yeah. Hugo said, hey, look, I have a facility, a big dry cleaning facility. That was his business. He had a franchise of dry cleaners. He had 34 dry cleaners.
Wow.
And he said, hey, look, I'm going to give you access to my facility, which is very expensive because it's millions of dollars worth of equipment, a lot of staff. He said, I'm gonna let you clean clothes here for dirt cheap. You just convince someone to give you their clothes, you bring them to me, I'll clean it on the cheap, you charge the market rate, you make the spread. So this blazer that you have on, nice blazer, would cost you $7. I would go to a guy like you and say, hey, how are you? My name's John Henry. Shit. I like your smile, this and that. Wow, you look dapper. What do you do for work? Just work on you. And eventually I say, look, here's my card. If you ever need your dry cleaning done, I'll handle it. Eventually you'd be like, damn, I kind of like this kid. You give me a call, I bring it to Hugo, he charged me $2, I charge you $7, I make $5, that's the spread. Eventually I was like, damn, that's $5. Sounds like, not a lot, but if I'm doing 100 pieces, that's bread. And no matter how much times I open this door and how many times I smile, I'm not gonna make more than the 12 bucks an hour I was making. So now I started to understand, this is what entrepreneurship is. And by the way, when I started, I didn't know what venture capital was and this and that, all this bullshit. I just knew you put in the work, like input equals output. That's what entrepreneurship means to me. And so, I went on that path. Eventually I got introduced to the film and the TV industry. And I worked my way into this industry and I started doing the dry cleaning for The Wolf of Wall Street, Boardwalk Empire, Law and Order, and then afterwards, that's when it began to flourish for me.
Wow. So, what advice would you give someone in the audience that is looking to take this leap into full-time entrepreneurship?
Well, who here is working on a side hustle? Hands up. Leave your hands up. Leave your hand up if you want to turn that side hustle into a full-time hustle. Okay. Leave your hand up if you think that your obstacle is money. Okay, what's your obstacle? If it's not money, what is it? You, right here. Yes, no, right here, this young lady here.
Okay.
No, in the blue blazer right here. Behind Monica.
Me?
Yes.
Marketing.
Marketing. Who else has one? What is it? Time. You? Good one.
Wait, is it if you don't have money or if you do?
If you think money's not your obstacle, what is it?
Money's not the obstacle.
What is it?
It's focusing on best practices.
Okay. Wow. Okay. The reason I did that is because I think this is a special room. In many cases, I think people are tempted to believe that the obstacle is money. And I was going to dive in and explore how that's rarely the obstacle, really, when you start. Homie said himself, marketing, best practices, focus. These are all excellent answers. I think that when you're starting, for all those who had their hands up, it's a side hustle. That's the biggest blessing that you have right now. The fact that it's a side hustle means that you have limited time. You're doing it on the side. Tight time is efficient time. You'll be surprised once you start doing it full time, when your time opens up, you start not knowing what to do and you get lost in the time. And that's all you've been praying for. All you've been praying for is, wow, I want to do this thing full time. When you start doing it full time, you're like, I don't know what the hell to do with all this time. So your tight time right now, that is your blessing. You don't have to quit your day job, you just have to quit your leisure, right? So if you work on that, and eventually it will cost you more money to stay at your job than it does to leave your job. Until you get to that point, you're not ready. So when I was working as a doorman, I was going to school. Mind you, again, I was working the grave shift. I was then leaving my job at 7 a.m. and starting school at 9. Went straight from the job, smelling terrible, going to school, studying, and then after I would leave that, then go and try and hustle you for your dry cleaning. Like, that's legit, right? And as I started getting more and more customers, eventually the balance starts to shift. And I started noticing, wow, like, I can't be in school because I have orders to fill. And so one day I'm in business law class, and I'm cutting a contract with my mentor in real life, and I'm sitting in a classroom, and the lady's teaching me about how to cut a contract, and I thought, why am I going to be in this classroom when I have a real life example? And it hit me, and I packed up my things, and I said, yo, teach, I'm out. And that was my last day. The next time I was in school, I was being paid to teach people how to be successful in business, which I think is ironic. But that is how you nurture the side hustle. You put the time in, you put the reps in, right? Like you can't build a six-pack unless you do sit-ups, right? You gotta business is a similar muscle. Flex that muscle, build the side hustle. Eventually, you're gonna start noticing your priorities shift over into the full-time hustle.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the financial aspect of it because you mentioned that a lot of times it's actually not money, but like how do you go about financial wellness and planning for both the short and long term during the process of going full-time entrepreneur?
Financial planning. Well, it's interesting because if you want to walk the path of an entrepreneur, your relationship with financial planning is very peculiar. It's very distinct. When you have a job, you have steady income that you can count on and say, okay, I'm going to save. They say the rule that is talked about often is 50-30-20. So 50% of your income goes to needs, 30% of your income goes to wants, and 20% of your income goes to savings. That's what the institutions want. That's what they put out there. That's the appropriate thing. That's responsible. But being an entrepreneur is kind of not responsible. Like, you kind of have to take what you got, and the amount that you invest in yourself is directly equivalent to the amount that you believe in yourself. So how much do you believe in yourself? Because I believe in myself 100%. At least I tell myself that. Sometimes I doubt myself, but sometimes you got to tell that to yourself until you force yourself to believe it. So for me, financial planning has really meant, I'm glad you asked this question because it's a really interesting space. Let me invest in my ability to earn. If you're in your 20s, you better not be thinking about your fucking retirement account. You're in your 20s. This is the time that you have to be aggressive, to play it big. Like, you can always get a job. Anyone here is, if you're in this room, you're driven, you're talented, you can go out to the marketplace and get a job. Don't come to me with this, I'm gonna invest 20% of my stuff for retirement. That's not where we're at right now. You need to be investing that in your ability to hone a skill. And when you hone this skill and you become exceptional at this skill through meticulous, hours behind the craft, all of a sudden, you're gonna start being requested to appear places to exercise your skill. And you start getting paid an outsized amount because you're gonna look amongst your peers and you're gonna say, damn, I thought we were on the same level, but you guys haven't been putting in the work and I have. And as you put in more work, eventually the creme rises to the top and you start earning more. So what I think is a better formula for someone in their 20s, rather than putting away pennies in a savings account, put that all into yourself so you can hone. And when you can 10x your earning potential, you're in a much, much better place for the future. A much better place for the future.
Do you believe that there is a scarcity mindset right now? I talked to you about this earlier. I read at the Wall Street Journal said that millennial entrepreneurs are an endangered species, and that there's been 60% less private new businesses formed since 1989 from the ages of 18 and 30 than ever before in modern history. Why do you feel that there's those statistics as far as entrepreneurship goes? What's holding us back?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't get too caught up in statistics. There's a stat that said that by the year 2050, the net worth of Black and Latinos is going to be negative or something like that. I was like, not on my watch. You didn't ask me in your survey. You didn't ask me. I don't know if you guys got asked, but I don't care about the stats. I'm gonna defy all odds always anyway. And so when I listen to this stat, it's a stat, right? But let's dive into it because there's some validity there. Numerically, I suppose, there are less businesses being created, but 1989, what were you starting in 1989? You were starting, an ice cream truck, a barbershop, and all these things are awesome, but one business in 2018. Look at the potential that you have to reach scale and impact people with the millions. So is it a one-to-one comparison? I don't think so. So what if there's less people? I want there to be less people. Like, fuck it. I want there to be less people because, you know what? A lot of the people that are in the game now are not going to be in the game in 5 years anyway. So there might be less and less people, but it's interesting because if you're a player, that's potentially an advantage for you. You're like, all right, cool. I'm in a league with less people. How can I carve my own lane? How can I, am I going to be LeBron? Am I going to be Iverson? Am I going to be Kobe? Like, pick your style, play to your voice, create your lane, and thrive in that lane, my friends.
Yeah, love that.
Thrive in that lane. Now, there's a lot of depth there. When you're coming up, the most important thing is for you to hone a very fresh viewpoint and perspective. Why are you going to go toe-to-toe with the machine, with a bigger player? They have more money, they have more talent, they have more time than you, they have more resources, they have more everything than you. The odds can seem overwhelming, they are, but if you can find your own little lane, and by the way, the things that you think are your own disadvantages is exactly what's going to make you way different. I used to be embarrassed about where I came from and how we grew up, and that I could never afford to live downtown, and that I never had my own room, and like all this other stuff. I've turned that into my strength. I now get paid. I'm doing a TV show, I'm doing I fly around and I speak and I do books and I blah, 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 blah. That's the same thing that I thought was my disadvantage has now become the bedrock of my career. It's now why you guys are interested in hearing me speak. Like, oh, how did someone from this circumstance get to have an elevated perspective? And that's because I leaned in to what it was that makes me different. So for those of you listening, I see some folks nodding their heads. If this is resonating with you, I want you to double down on that because there's so much there and it could potentially go on to serve wonders for your career and whatever it is that you do.
I love it.
One of my biggest donors at this non-for-profit comes from a very big Jewish family. And they said, John, we've been watching you, we love what you're doing. Take your same energy and come work on our company for a year. We have a fund. We think you have an eye for talent. We want you to come and operate this fund that we have and help. We were going to invest in real estate technology. I said, Mr. Rose, respectfully, I know nothing about real estate. He said, we know real estate. It's a 4-generation they're a multi-generational real estate dynasty family. They're a Jewish family. I said, okay, I'll take you up on it. I worked with them for a year and a half. We made 10 investments together. The reason I share that is because we were talking about this earlier, working with a family, a legacy family, made a very, very deep impact on me, and particularly a Jewish family. The Jewish community is one that I admire very much. I think that they've done a lot of excellent things and have instilled a lot of great principles, and the bedrock and the foundation is very beautiful, and they think generational wealth. When I finished my year there with the Rose family, I said, I can't stay here, respectfully. Like, what I've learned here is so valuable and it needs to exist in our communities. So I left Wall Street and I came uptown, and that's when we started Harlem Capital, with the whole idea of helping to build generational wealth in our communities. And one thing that I want to clarify, because it gets talked about like this Mother Teresa thing, like, oh, good for you, you're investing in black people and women. I'm like, yeah, but I'm a fucking capitalist. Like, I'm a die-hard businessman. I will sell you whatever I can sell you. That's what an entrepreneur is. So I just want to set the record straight. Diversity happens to be a very good business case right now, because let's analyze venture capital for a moment. In 2017, there was $84, roughly, billion invested into venture capital. Less than 4% total went to women and minorities, less than, out of $84 billion, which, by the way, sounds like a big number. It's really just a sliver of the total amount that's invested into a bunch of stuff, treasury stocks, blah, blah, blah. I've learned all this stuff as I've gone on. But venture is a tiny sliver. Once you get really rich and you have real estate and all this other stuff, and you need to diversify, you look at venture, tiny sliver. And then when you zoom in on that, you say, wow, the majority of it literally is just going to white males, which is cool, no harm, no foul. But then you're telling me 4% to 6% total is going to women, blacks, Latinos, anyone who's not a white male? That smells like a business opportunity to me. That smells like money. Why? Because millennials, and particularly diverse millennials, we're now the largest segment of the population. And by the end of this year, we'll be the largest segment of the working population, which means lots of spending power, which means decisions, which means we're gonna be able to dictate and command what it is that rises to prominence. Our spending power is gonna result in the next public companies. We are already doing it. And you're telling me that the people that are tasked with creating the solutions, 96% of the people that are tasked with creating the solutions don't look like us? They're not going to be able to create what we resonate with. So don't get it twisted, like, yes, it's 100% my life's work to, uplift my community, but it's also really good business.
So what are the common mistakes that you're seeing, though, in the marketplace right now with new small business owners or startup entrepreneurs?
So it's just my own perspective, but number of mistakes, it's the same ones repeated over and over. Probably the most important business lesson I learned early is that there's riches and niches. There's riches and niches. All my competitors in dry cleaning, they were killing themselves for a $40 transaction. I was in my own lane. Every one account that I had was $40,000 to $50,000 for me. Guys, I had Law & Order as an account. Do you know what season Law & Order's on? Me neither, right? Like, they just go on and on and on and on. So, I had an account that would always come back to me. Boardwalk Empire, another one. Person of Interest, White Collar, Amazing Spider-Man 2, Ninja Turtles, Barclays Center, you name it. We had it, not because I was that good. I was 18 years old. I'm a college dropout. I had no business experience. I had no one I can go to. I didn't have an uncle that was an accountant that could teach me about taxes. I didn't have any of that. What I had was my own lane. Just going back to that earlier. I only have a few good points that I just riff off over and over. Your own lane. I had my own lane, and in this lane, there was only one other competitor, the incumbent, if you will, who was very comfortable, super comfortable. I call the film account. Hey, Minerva's not willing to come at 3 in the morning. I said, I'll be there. My ass was there at 3 in the morning, picking up their dirty underwear. Me, alone. And then eventually with my brother. And then eventually with my other brother, literally. We were going through the subway and lugging sacks of laundry. We were going from Manhattan all the way down to the L and crossing all over into Bushwick, lugging dirty laundry to Hugo so he could clean it and then lugging it back. It's not a fucking joke. Like, entrepreneurship is not an app. That's the biggest mistake. It's not an app. Guys, entrepreneurship is not an app. It's not an app. It's not an app. People get caught up in the platform, and I had someone reach out and say, "Hey, I want to sell ice cream," which is great, fine. I love ice cream, but she's like, "I need to build this app first." I said, "My dear, you want to sell ice cream? You think you need an app? Do you want to know how to sell ice cream? Hey, how are you, man? You look like you could use some. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Vanilla.
Vanilla?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your favorite ice cream brand?
I don't really have one.
Okay, listen, well, I'm starting a small business, and your support would mean so much to me as a community local. I firmly believe that small business is the bedrock to our communities, and I'm taking the initiative to start an ice cream shop. Would you like to support my shop today and buy ice cream from me?
Sure.
Boom. That's entrepreneurship.
You didn't tell me you get the best vanilla ice cream in the block.
I missed that part. I missed that part. And I didn't even have to tell her that. And once you sprinkle it in, like...
That's because you smile.
So, guys, the reason I did that, I hope that brings to life, entrepreneurship is not an app. All the technology in the platform is a vehicle to express the problem that you're solving. That's the biggest mistake I see. And then separately, going back earlier, carve your own lane. I was that guy going 3 in the morning. That's what eventually I toppled the top guy. We took all his business. And eventually that's someone stepped in and made me the offer to buy my business based on the book of business that I had built over a couple of years.
So we have one minute, and then we're gonna finally get into the Q&A and really start to create some dialogue here. But my last question would be like, so what does leadership really mean to you? Like, how did you find the leader within, and how do you continue to push forward as a leader?
That's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, it's a deep question. And the reason I'm riffing here in my mind is because I struggle with my own sense of leadership sometimes. And I'm just being vulnerable and transparent here because, there's so many things within me that I have yet to figure out. And I'm very intense, if you guys can't tell, about my work and the way I do things. And sometimes, early in my career, that has caused a lot of strain in relationships, whether co-founders or, there's a mismatched level of intensity. And so I've shifted in my leadership style from being a micromanager to trusting more, but then I've gone through times where I've trusted more in attempts to be a good manager, and then the product doesn't come out like how I want it to. And there's a guy named Joni Ive who, if you have an iPhone, it's because of Joni Ive. He's a designer. He's the main designer on the iPhone. And he was telling stories about Steve Jobs when he passed. And he said, he shared in a story I'll share with you guys. So he was hearing people were upset with Steve Jobs because, he was kind of a dick. And Joni Ive was like, all right, I'm gonna tell Steve Jobs, because he had Steve Jobs' ear. And so people were like, yo, you have Steve Jobs' ear. You gotta tell him he's gotta cut it out. So, he mustered up the courage, he called the meeting, he finally sat down with Steve Jobs, and he goes, he tells it like it is. He said, hey man, you're being a little hard on people, people are starting to, not like this, da da da. And he was expecting Steve Jobs to say, oh man, I'm sorry, da da da. And he goes, you're selfish. And Joni Ive was shocked. He was expecting an apology. Steve Jobs was like, you're selfish. He's like, you care more about what people think about you than the product. You would rather preserve your view, the way people perceive you. You'd rather not rock the boat. You'd rather, than do whatever in your mind you feel is best for the product. Steve Jobs had a purity, a love of the craft. Kanye West, I put in the same boat. That is art to me. And it's coming to me here because with your question about leadership, I think it's all about finding what style resonates with you. There are many different ways to win. Gary Vee is the type of leader that's, very nice and empathy and that's his whole approach. I'm now discovering that my way of leading simply means to listen very intensely to myself, which I'm discovering means I don't like holding back. I am outspoken. I will say things that are inconvenient and that cost me career capital and social capital if I feel like that's what needs to be said. You know what I'm saying? And it's the more difficult path, but I feel like, damn, if I'm 1 in a million from my community, you go to any kid on the block who grew up on 173rd in Fort Washington and Washington Heights, and I guarantee you, I'm probably 1 in a million. And if that's true, I have a responsibility. I can't be selfish and be concerned with what other people, not rocking the boat. I'm getting endorsement deals now, and I'm getting pressure from sponsors to taper down my personality. I was like, man, you got it twisted. I don't do this to eat breakfast. I've built my own value chain. I'm dependent. My livelihood comes from things that I've built for myself. And so I feel like leadership is staying 100% unapologetically, authentically true to that compass that you started with.
Create more leaders. Thank you. John Henry, everybody.